what percentage of the top-selling educational or children's applications are for preschoolers? More than 50? Less than 50?
More than
More. 60% of the top sellers are for preschool kids. And so we began to track this aspect of what's going on. And this study before you kind of takes a look at not only the very preliminary findings that we have about how to meld together the informal learning with that kind of baseline, how are the kids doing on key literacy skills, with a sense of where are parents coming from. We talked to 810 parents who were early adopters of smartphone technologies, and I'll tell you in a minute about that. And we talked to the kids themselves, and here's what we found. One, the early learning from these kinds of applications is promising, but by no means proven. Two, parents are passing back. Just about every parent who has a smartphone, particular iPhone, is passing back. But they're very skeptical about what kind of learning can go on, with good reason. The kids are using this to fill up the day. There isn't a lot of intentional instruction going on between parent and child yet. Although when parents see that there's an educational benefit, sometimes they grow from being more or less real skeptical to much less skeptical. And then the kids themselves, here's where the magic around linking the informal with the formal may come. The kids themselves are amazing. 81%, I think, are able to use the iTouch when given it the first time. They understand the interface, it's totally intuitive. And those who have difficulty turning it on or doing the swipe, one chance to fix it, it's all done. It's all fixed.
I just want to speak to that just for a second.
And tape it.
I mentioned when we handed out these iPod Touches to these kids that we recruited from the Title I schools, none of them had ever owned one before. And we did one session where we handed them out to the kids, and the parents and the researchers were in the room just for about an hour to orient the kids to the iPod Touch. No problem. They all caught on so quickly. The biggest usability issue we had the whole time was kids pressing too hard and making that reorganization interface come up and accidentally deleting the apps, trying to get to them. So we did have to keep bringing the iPods back in to reload the apps, but that was the only issue. Kids try to hold it landscape, and so they might get two thumbs on it. So we learned we had to disengage the zoom feature, that's swipe spreads feature. But that's still the only other thing. When you compare that to where we've been building games for the last 11 years on pbskids.org to a keyboard and mouse, so much less clunky, so much easier for kids to jump right into that experience.
Just to jump in, because I think we only have a little bit. We're definitely getting back on time. I think, Michael, one of the things, and both you and Sara are big advocates for standards and really incentivizing developers and getting people to actually build educational apps. I think, from the industry reps, we had apps are going to be a big deal. What's the best way in which we can move with Google and Android and iTunes and also app developers to build standards?
Yeah, we have to work on this. So those, we have to work on this together. Those apps that are on the educational stores, the stores are really growing in many ways now, that we've taken a look at, of the 60% that were bestsellers and labeled themselves educational, 10% had independent evidence. 10% had any evidence at all that they actually had an educational bottom line. So first of all, we need to be honest in checking our marketing desires with potent research. I think that there is a process that we can go through, and many folks in this room have better ideas than I do, in which I'm not against the marketing of really fun and interesting stuff as educational and just some evidence, but there's a way of processing how the evidence is defined that should be done on a voluntary basis within industry. And I think that there's some other kind of parent advocate organizations and groups like PBS Kids that can begin to inform parents about what the evidence is. I see a future where the App Store or the Ovi Store or the Android Store are going to have richly curated sites with both expert knowledge and crowdsourced knowledge coming together. I think that we can construct something that would be very, very helpful.
What's the one thing you'd like to see in 2011, 2012 actually happen? in that area? You talked about a lot of different things, and I want to ask Sara the same question. What was the one thing that you think would be the most impactful?
There's a lot of work in the games industry now to take a look at the Games and Learning Connect. And I think that we need to have a similar set of convenings in the mobile industry. And a lot of us are beginning to talk about this. We will have a convening in May 16th and 17th that the Cooney Center will be putting on with many different partners, in which we'll be talking about very specific principles. David Kleeman is very involved in working with the Fred Rogers Center, for example, in defining these principles for what is educational and what defines healthy development in the kid space.
I'm really interested to see what continues to happen in classrooms. At the ISTE conference last year, you're already seeing a lot of classrooms bring in iPads, but not really using them with educational games, really more using them as kind of another way of writing on paper. So what's going to happen as teachers begin to understand how to unlock the potential of the real interactivity available in these iPads? The other thing I think is going to be really interesting, and I really think we should watch, is on the iPhone and iPod touches that include a camera, what's happening with augmented reality. What happens if we can put kids in a real environmental space and use things in the room around them to bring that into gameplay? And how does that additional 3D option help with things like spatial awareness and math lessons? I mean, I think it's a really interesting new space to watch.
One of the things I think is important, last year, Julie Stankowski came here, and I think discussions about infrastructure to allow the child and the family to follow the learning needs across settings is extremely important. So there are infrastructure issues that relate to E-rate and what's happening in community settings as well as in home settings and in school settings. And there's also, I think, a real need to get government involved in incenting public-private partnerships for public good, the expansion of what CBB and PBS are already doing as opposed to the rollback of what they're doing in the educational space would be something that all of us should get our arms around. And the challenge to industry to spend some as the economy comes back, I call it the 7% solution. If we could spend 7% on research and development around kids and learning, both in government and in private sector, we'd be well on the way to doing something constructive.
So learning, there's an app for that. Please read it, tweet it, Facebook it, get it out there. Let's let people read it. Thank you very much.